This HOA Karen demolished my trash can 57 times using her $60,000 Escalade. So I substituted it with a concrete one and observed as she wrecked her own SUV in its place. What began as a daily ritual of morning property demolition concluded with criminal charges, a settlement of $12,000, and an extremely costly life lesson regarding the choice of which neighbor to bully. Imagine the scene. The loud crack of shattering plastic reverberates in the dawn's quiet, soon followed by the metallic sound of a bumper scraping the asphalt as a pearl-white Escalade accelerates away, leaving my trash strewn across the driveway like confetti once more. However, the interesting thing about bullies is that they don't anticipate their targets retaliating with literal concrete evidence. Before I was through, this self-proclaimed compliance officer had ruined her own vehicle, uncovered a $47,000 embezzlement plot, and discovered the difficult way that some neighbors will not be cowed by clipboards and feigned authority. In all seriousness, how would you react if your neighbor was essentially conducting a demolition derby with your property every morning? Leave a comment to share where you're tuning in from. I'm curious to see if this level of HOA insanity is also occurring in your area. Let me go back and recount how this entire disaster began. My name is Marcus Holloway at 45. I've worked as an electrician for 22 years. I'm recently divorced and in a battle for joint custody of my two teenagers, 16-year-old Emma and 14-year-old Tyler. We reside in Pinewood Gardens, a typical cookie-cutter HOA community in suburban Ohio, where every lawn is mandated to be exactly 2.5 inches high and mailboxes are only available in 3 pre-approved colors. I purchased the house on the corner lot 3 years ago, just after the divorce was finalized. I thought it would represent a new beginning. You know, a place where the kids could have their own spaces, attend good schools, and live in a safe area. What I hadn't counted on was having to contend with Brenda Whitmore, a 52-year-old widow who had taken it upon herself to be the neighborhood's compliance officer. A position that, incidentally, is not mentioned anywhere in our HOA's bylaws. Brenda pilots a pearl-white Escalade that is larger than some city studio apartments. She arrived about 3 years ago following her husband's passing. She has no children and is retired from a position managing a bank downtown. This woman has memorized every HOA regulation and handles our monthly dues as if they were her private discretionary fund. She is friendly with the HOA president, Gerald Thornfield, a fact that essentially grants her immunity. Now, this is where the geography of the situation gains significance. My property's corner location means that for trash collection, I am required to set my bin out near the road every Tuesday morning. The city ordinance specifies it must be within 3 feet of the curb, which positions it directly on the path where Brenda takes her daily power walk at precisely 6:15 a.m. The initial event took place on a Tuesday in September. During the second week of the school year, I was getting my kids prepared for the day, the coffee was brewing, and the distinct diesel sound of the garbage truck was still about 20 minutes out. Then a sharp crack. The sound of plastic bursting like a firearm discharge. I hurried outdoors to see my trash can annihilated, its contents scattered over my driveway as if someone had set off a confetti bomb loaded with banana peels and used coffee grounds, and there was Brenda, reversing her Escalade and lowering her window with a feigned look of concern. "Oh my," she uttered, with no hint of genuine regret in her tone. "These streets are just so tight. I trust you weren't overly fond of that old container?" An old container? I had purchased it just the week prior for $23 at Home Depot, but I maintained my composure. I assumed it was an accident. I then spent the next 20 minutes gathering soggy cereal boxes and coffee filters as the smell of diesel fumes lingered in the morning atmosphere. Emma and Tyler observed from the front window, mortified that their father was on his hands and knees on the driveway in his pajamas. In that first week, it occurred 3 more times. The pattern was consistent. 6:15 a.m. sharp, the roar of her oversized engine, the sickening sound of plastic meeting steel, and then quiet as she departed. By Friday, my suspicions were aroused. By the next Tuesday, I was certain it was deliberate. Mrs. Olivia, my elderly neighbor from across the street, verified my suspicions. She intentionally takes the long route, she informed me in her precise English. There is ample space on the other side, yet she consistently drives near your bin. I first attempted to reason with Brenda. I approached her on the sidewalk during one of her afternoon patrols. "Hey," regarding the trash can issue, but she interrupted me with a saccharine grin. "Marcus, I realize you are new to communal living. These roads were planned for standard-sized vehicles, not for oversized containers impeding the flow of traffic. It might be wise for you to think about making placement timing adjustments. Placement timing adjustments? As if there existed some magical time when the garbage truck didn't require the can to be at the curb. That evening, I began researching property rights, HOA bylaws, and city ordinances. It turned out that trash cans set on a public right-of-way are still considered personal property. Crucially, our HOA has no distinct regulations concerning placement timing or materials, only that they must not be visible from the street except on the day of collection. By the end of the month, I had replaced 4 trash cans, costing me a total of $92. The kids were becoming anxious about the daily conflict, and my custody evaluator was documenting issues related to neighborhood stability. A change was necessary. That was when the smirk appeared. Brenda started to make direct eye contact during her morning demolition runs, sporting a small, self-satisfied smile that clearly communicated she was fully aware of her actions. The game was on. 2 weeks into October, Brenda's tactics shifted from property damage to psychological warfare. I returned from a job site to find a certified letter awaiting me. The type that makes your stomach clench before you even tear open the envelope. The heavy paper felt costly in my hands, and the scent of fresh ink signaled this was no generic form letter she had been holding onto. Improper trash receptacle placement creating traffic hazard. It stated in formal legalese that a paralegal would admire. Section 4.7.3, no obstruction of vehicular traffic patterns. The ultimatum: 72 hours to correct the violation or incur daily fines of $50. She had clearly fast-tracked this through the system while the board was still recovering from the documentation I presented at the last meeting. This is where my experience in troubleshooting electrical codes proved beneficial. When the facts don't align, you investigate further. That night, I immersed myself in municipal law as if I were tracking down a short circuit. After 3 hours of comparing city ordinances with county regulations, I found what I was looking for. The city code explicitly mandates that trash be placed within 3 feet of the curb on collection day. More significantly, an HOA's authority stops at the property line. They have no legal power to regulate the public right-of-way. I recalled reading about a similar case online where a homeowner in California defeated their HOA with this very same argument. I dedicated the weekend to constructing my defense, much like I was studying for the electrical contractor's exam all over again. A Ring doorbell camera was positioned perfectly to record the morning ritual. $47 for peace of mind. A professional survey confirmed my placement was in full compliance with all city regulations. I even persuaded Mrs. Olivia to give a written statement, although her hands trembled a bit as she signed it. "I do not wish for any trouble," she whispered. "But this is not fair." In the meantime, Brenda was actively playing the role of a prosecutor on social media. She inundated the Nextdoor app with posts about irresponsible homeowners putting children at risk and dangerous corner obstacles compelling conscientious drivers into the path of oncoming traffic. The comments section devolved into a war between her 3 devoted followers and everyone else who believed she had completely lost her grip on reality. Then came the development that demonstrated just how desperate she was becoming. A friend at City Hall, Dave, who works in the permit office and with whom I've done electrical work, called me on Tuesday morning with some intriguing information. The city had gotten 4 separate complaints concerning my hazardous corner. Each one alleged different witness viewpoints but was clearly penned by the same individual. The timestamps indicated they were all lodged within a 15-minute window at 2:47 a.m. Hardly professional detective work, Marcus? Dave joked over the phone. Either your neighborhood is experiencing an epidemic of insomniacs with identical pros, or someone is putting in extra hours to build a case against you. By the Thursday board meeting, I had assembled a file substantial enough to choke a horse. The community center smelled of industrial-grade carpet cleaner and decades of tedious municipal gatherings. 12 homeowners were present, a record attendance that had President Thornfield nervously fiddling with his tie every 30 seconds. Brenda was seated at the board table in a navy blazer that conveyed a no-nonsense attitude, but I caught the slight shake in her hands as she reached for her water glass. She sensed what was about to happen. When they moved to old business, I rose with my documentation. I wished to address the violation notice concerning trash can placement. The fluorescent lights hummed above as the room fell completely silent. I recited the city ordinance verbatim and presented my survey results that demonstrated perfect compliance. The finishing touch was casually noting my consultation with Amanda Sterling. a property rights attorney with experience in dozens of HOA cases. She found the patterns of selective enforcement particularly noteworthy. I remarked, observing. Brenda's face turned pale. President Thornfield cleared his throat 3 times before he could speak. Well, this will necessitate further examination. We will table this issue pending additional consideration. In other words, they had no case, and it was obvious to everyone, but Brenda wasn't finished. As we were leaving, she accosted me in the parking lot beneath the buzzing security lights. It was there that she truly revealed her character. "You believe you're so clever?" she hissed, loudly. Enough for the dozen or so homeowners still conversing nearby to catch every word. "People like you move into respectable neighborhoods and assume the rules don't pertain to you. Well, let me tell you something, this is only the start." Mrs. Rodriguez from Maple Street actually gasped. Jim Torres, our maintenance man, suddenly became intensely interested in his keys. The racial implications lingered in the humid October air like the smoke from a house fire. Apparent to all who were there, my phone, casually placed in my shirt pocket, recorded every malicious syllable. That night, Emma inquired why the mean lady disliked us so much. Tyler asked if we would have to relocate again. I tucked them into their beds, assuring them that everything would be resolved, but in private, I was tallying the expense of this conflict: 3 replacement trash cans, 14 hours spent on documentation, and accumulating attorney consultation fees. However, a change had occurred within the community. Other homeowners were murmuring about the board's overreach and posing difficult questions about selective enforcement. Brenda's parking lot outburst had confirmed what many had already suspected. This wasn't about traffic safety or maintaining community standards. It was about power, control, and subjugating people she disliked. The following morning marked a significant change. Instead of her typical aggressive ramming tactic, Brenda drove past my trash can at a snail's pace, scrutinizing it as if she were a general formulating her next attack. The strategy was shifting, which signaled that more serious trouble was on the horizon. November arrived in Pinewood Gardens like a frigid slap across the face, and Brenda retaliated with even greater force. While I was patting myself on the back for winning the initial round, she was diligently weaponizing every obscure HOA bylaw she could unearth. The woman had evidently dedicated weeks to poring over our community guidelines as though she were a prosecutor constructing a RICO case. The offensive was launched in successive waves. First came a violation notice regarding the height of my grass, which, at an apparent 2.75 inches, criminally surpassed the 2.5-inch maximum by 1/4 of an inch. Next was the color of my mailbox, which had faded from heritage blue to what she termed an unauthorized weathered navy. Lastly, there were 3 minuscule tears in my window screens that would require a magnifying glass to be seen. Each infraction came with a $50 fine and a 10-day payment deadline. The clincher was that I devoted an entire Saturday afternoon to walking through the neighborhood equipped with a measuring tape and a camera, documenting identical violations at 14 other homes. Gerald Thornfield's lawn was approaching 3 inches. Mrs. Patterson's mailbox had faded to a shade very similar to mine. Half the residences on Maple Street had screen damage from the summer hailstorm. Yet, for some reason, only my violations were deemed worthy of official action. While Brenda was busy acting as a bylaw enforcer, I was having coffee with Dale Kowalski at the contractor desk of Home Depot. Dale has been working with concrete for 23 years, and when I brought up my trash can issues, his rugged face cracked into a knowing smile. "You know," he remarked, stirring sugar into his coffee with a paint stirrer, "there's no city ordinance specifying the materials you can use for trash containers. Plastic, metal, concrete, it doesn't matter. As long as it can contain garbage and meets the size regulations, you're in the clear." That exchange planted an idea that would blossom into Brenda's greatest nightmare: 60 pounds of concrete mix, steel rebar for added strength, and an ingenious alteration to a standard plastic container. The total expense was $47, compared to the $350 I was confronting in escalating fines and replacement cans. But before that, I needed to address her campaign of harassment. I spent Tuesday evening compiling comprehensive photographic evidence of every comparable violation in our community. On Wednesday morning, I submitted a formal complaint to the HOA board concerning selective and discriminatory enforcement practices. Here's something I've learned from managing electrical permits for 2 decades. Bureaucrats despise it when you turn their own procedures against them. My complaint compelled the board to either apply the rules uniformly to all properties or confess that they were singling me out. Neither choice was favorable for Brenda. The truly significant development occurred when I began to examine the demographics of those she targeted with violations. Over the previous year, Brenda had handed out 67 violation notices. Of those, 49 were directed at single parents, elderly residents, or minorities. Only 18 were issued to married couples or long-standing homeowners. The trend was so clear it was practically shouting lawsuit. I recalled reading about Fair Housing Act violations. Discrimination in HOA enforcement can lead to federal investigations. The image of Brenda trying to justify her citation patterns to a civil rights attorney brought a smile to my face for the first time in weeks. On Friday afternoon, I began my weekend concrete project. Emma and Tyler found it amusing, assisting me in mixing cement in the garage as classic rock blared from my paint-splattered radio. The aroma of setting concrete evoked memories of helping my father pour our basement floor 30 years earlier. That unique alkaline smell that signified the creation of something enduring. The design was straightforward yet effective. A hollow bottom for weight distribution, drainage holes kept for practicality, and an exterior that looked identical to every other trash can on the street. From the outside, it appeared completely ordinary. Inside, however, 60 pounds of steel-reinforced concrete lay in wait to impart a physics lesson to Brenda about immovable objects. On Monday morning, I set my newly reinforced trash can in its usual spot. 6:15 arrived as expected, along with the sound of Brenda's large engine. This time, however, something was different. Her approach was slower, more tentative. She had clearly observed that the can looked the same, yet she seemed to feel something was amiss. The initial impact happened at around 15 miles per hour, her typical ramming velocity. The sound was entirely different. Instead of the sickening crunch of plastic breaking, there was a solid thud, followed by the shriek of metal scraping against concrete. Her Escalade's running board buckled like a piece of aluminum foil, while my trash can remained in place, looking slightly miffed. I observed from my kitchen window the warmth of my coffee mug against my hands, as Brenda remained in her SUV for a full 30 seconds. Evidently perplexed by the event, she revved the engine and made another attempt from a different angle. The outcome was the same: more damage to her vehicle and none to my concrete fortress. The genius of the entire arrangement was its absolute legality. No city ordinances were broken, no HOA rules were violated. Just a homeowner enhancing his trash receptacle with superior materials. If she chose to continue ramming it, that was her decision and her insurance claim to handle. Over the following week, Brenda made increasingly frantic efforts to damage my concrete creation. Each impact left fresh scratches and dents on her pearl-white Escalade, while my can stayed defiantly intact. The irony was exquisite. Her own aggressive actions were ruining the very vehicle she wielded as a weapon. By Friday, her SUV had sustained nearly $800 in cumulative damage. Mine had a few scuff marks that made it look more genuine. The neighborhood began to gossip, and for the first time, Brenda was not in control of the conversation. By the middle of November, Brenda had evolved from a neighborhood busybody into a full-fledged private detective. The woman had become so fixated on my trash can that she likely dreamt about it in flowcharts and conspiracy theories. I would catch sight of her pearl-white Escalade, now adorned with an increasing number of dents and scratches, driving past my house at unusual times, like a suburban stalker. The first indication of her detective work arrived on a Tuesday morning when Mrs. Olivia called, her voice barely a whisper. "Marcus, that woman was in your driveway last night with a flashlight and some sort of scale. I saw her from my bedroom window. She was attempting to weigh your trash can." The mental picture made me laugh. Brenda, likely dressed in her navy blazer and practical shoes, prowling around my property at midnight with a bathroom scale, trying to unravel the enigma of the indestructible trash receptacle. The woman clearly needed a hobby that did not involve trespassing. Her investigation grew more intense as the week progressed. Jim Torres, our maintenance man, mentioned she had cornered him at the hardware store, questioning him about concrete purchases and inquiring which residents had recently bought unusual materials. She had even begun to monitor my social media profiles, searching for clues about construction in my Facebook posts about weekend activities. The development that truly revealed her desperation occurred when she attempted to use city bureaucracy against me again. On Thursday afternoon, a building inspector appeared at my door. He was a weary-looking man named Pete, who obviously had more important things to do than inspect trash cans. A woman filed a complaint about possible building code violations. He stated, ticking boxes on his clipboard with the disinterest of someone completing tax forms, something about unauthorized concrete structures on residential property. I led Pete to the trash can, where he spent about 30 seconds inspecting it before shaking his head. It's a garbage container, not a foundation, no permits are needed, and there are no violations, frankly. I've seen people construct entire sheds with less official attention. But Brenda was not done with her campaign of official harassment. The next week, a notice arrived from the HOA demanding immediate access to my property for compliance verification. The letter, clearly written by Brenda and approved by President Thornfield, stated they needed to check my exterior modifications for safety violations. This is where my investigation into property rights proved invaluable. I had dedicated hours to studying Fourth Amendment protections and the limits of HOA authority after that initial violation notice. The key case was Narrett versus Lakeside Village, in which the courts determined that HOAs cannot conduct fishing expeditions on private property without a specific reason or in an emergency. My reply was courteous yet resolute. No access to my private property without a court order or a real emergency. If they wished to inspect my legally compliant trash receptacle, they were welcome to do so from the public sidewalk, just like anyone else. The scent of Brenda's frustration was almost as gratifying as that of fresh concrete. Meanwhile, her vehicle was turning into a mobile billboard for the strength of steel-reinforced concrete. Each morning brought new attempts at collision, and each attempt resulted in fresh damage to her Escalade. The running board now drooped at an angle like a fractured wing, her front bumper was covered in spiderweb cracks, and one of her headlight casings had started to rattle ominously. The neighborhood was beginning to take note. During my Saturday morning coffee run, I overheard 3 separate conversations about that crazy woman who keeps hitting the same trash can. Mrs. Rodriguez had begun timing Brenda's morning routine, while the teenagers on Elm Street had reportedly started a betting pool on the daily collision outcomes. Emma found the entire situation both hilarious and mortifying. "Dad, kids at school are asking if we're the family with the concrete lady," she said to me at dinner. "I'm not sure if I should be embarrassed or proud of having the best revenge story in the district." Tyler, always practical, inquired if we could sell tickets to the morning show. "Seriously, Dad, we could charge $5 a head and pay for my college education just from neighbors wanting front row seats to the demolition derby." The significant breakthrough occurred when Patricia Lopez, the sole rational board member, took me aside after a neighborhood event. In hushed tones near the community center's coffee machine, she provided information that altered everything. "Marcus, you should be aware that Brenda has been holding private discussions with Gerald about increasing enforcement powers. She wants the board to grant authority for property inspections, material limitations, and even background checks on contractors for homeowner projects. But Patricia's most crucial revelation was financial. She has also been aggressively advocating for the approval of maintenance contracts with a company I've never heard of. Whenever we talk about the budget, she has these elaborate proposals prepared, as if she's been planning this for months. That evening, I initiated a different kind of inquiry. If Brenda was this determined to control neighborhood projects and promote certain contractors, perhaps her motive wasn't solely about power, perhaps it was about financial gain. Public records are remarkable resources when you know how to navigate them, and municipal contract databases reveal fascinating details about who is compensated for what. By Sunday evening, I had found something that made her obsession with the trash can seem insignificant. Brenda Whitmore was not just a control freak with an excess of free time. She was orchestrating a scam, and my concrete fortress had inadvertently jeopardized her entire scheme. Sunday night research sessions were typically reserved for assisting Emma with her history assignments or Tyler with his algebra problems. On this particular evening, however, I was engrossed in the city's public contract database, pursuing a suspicion that Patricia Lopez's warning had lodged in my mind like a splinter. I began with a simple search for any recent business filings that included the name Whitmore. The result made me put down my coffee and lean in closer to the computer screen. Whitmore Construction, LLC, established 6 months ago, listed Brenda Whitmore as a 40% owner and her husband, Richard, as the president. The sequence of events sent a shiver down my spine. The company was formed in May, the first bid for an HOA maintenance contract was in July, and the harassment campaign against me commenced in early September. The connections were startlingly clear. I dedicated the following 2 hours to a deeper dive into public records, and my findings would have brought a forensic accountant to tears of joy over the preceding 4 months. Whitmore Construction had secured 7 different maintenance contracts from our HOA board. These included landscape edging, sidewalk repairs, touch-ups at the community center, and playground maintenance, totaling $23,400 in work. The bidding process revealed the true nature of the operation. For every single contract, Whitmore Construction had submitted a bid that was precisely $50 to $100 lower than the competition. Not enough to arouse suspicion, but just enough to ensure they were chosen. It was akin to watching someone play cards with a marked deck. The moves were technically within the rules, but the game was clearly fixed. Here is what truly set my electrician's mind into high gear. Brenda had voted in favor of approving every single one of those contracts, 7 votes, 7 approvals, 7 payments to her family's business. The conflict of interest was so glaring it might as well have been outlined in neon. I recalled reading about fiduciary duty violations. During my earlier legal research, board members are obligated to disclose any financial stakes in vendor contracts. A failure to do so is a violation of state nonprofit corporation law and creates a pathway for both civil lawsuits and criminal fraud charges. The proof was right there in digital form. Business registration papers, HOA meeting minutes, contract award documentation, and deposit slips from the association's monthly bank statements. Brenda had been exploiting her position on the board to channel community funds directly into her family's bank account. But the timeline exposed something even more incriminating. My first polite conversation with Brenda regarding the trash can incidents was on September 15th. My first inquiry about the maintenance budget at the monthly board meeting was on September 3rd. She had launched her harassment campaign just 12 days after I had innocently questioned why we were spending so much on routine repairs. My concrete trash can had not only been an obstacle on her morning power walk, it had been safeguarding evidence of a systematic theft from 127 homeowners. The range of potential infractions was staggering. Civil liability for financial mismanagement, criminal liability for fraud, and automatic dismissal from the board upon proof of a conflict of interest. This was no longer just a matter of property rights. It was about corruption, embezzlement, and a woman so desperate to conceal evidence that she would launch a psychological war against anyone who posed a threat to her scheme. I printed out everything, created digital backups on 3 different cloud services, and promptly sent the entire file to attorney Amanda Sterling with a note. Urgent review requested, potential criminal implications. The balance of power had just undergone a complete reversal. Brenda believed she was in a dispute with a divorced electrician over the placement of a trash can. In reality, she was on the verge of having a fraud scheme exposed that could result in federal prison time and bankrupt her family. On Tuesday morning, I watched from my kitchen window as she made her customary collision attempt with my concrete fortress. Her Escalade now displayed over $1,200 in cumulative damage, while my trash can stood there like an unyielding monument to her folly. But for the first time since this entire ordeal began, my thoughts were not on trash cans, HOA bylaws, or morning demolition derbies. I was contemplating justice, community protection, and the profound satisfaction of seeing a bully learn that their victims sometimes fight back with unexpected ferocity. The real battle was about to commence. On Tuesday evening, my garage was converted from a weekend hobby space into a command center that would have impressed Pentagon planners. I had cleared off the workbenches, arranged folding tables, and set up 5 mismatched chairs in a circle around an evidence board I had created, complete with construction paper and red string, resembling something out of a crime drama. The primary team gathered by 7:00 p.m. sharp. Mrs. Olivia was the first to arrive, holding a thermos of jasmine tea and looking nervously resolute. Jim Torres came next, still in his maintenance attire, his tool belt clinking with every step. Patricia Lopez carried a pile of HOA financial records she had borrowed from the board's files. Dale Kowalski was the last to arrive, with a box of donuts and a grin, as if we were orchestrating a surprise party rather than uncovering municipal corruption. All right, I began, attaching the final timeline chart to the garage wall. This is what we're up against. The display of evidence looked like something from a federal probe. $23,000 in suspicious contracts, 7 distinct conflict of interest violations, 47 documented instances of harassment, and 1 increasingly battered Escalade serving as tangible proof of Brenda's declining mental stability. Patricia let out a low whistle upon seeing the financial breakdown. I knew something was off about those contracts, but I never thought it was this organized. Every time I raised questions about the costs, Brenda had these elaborate explanations ready, as if she had memorized them. Dale studied the photos of the vehicle damage with a professional eye. That bumper will cost at least $2,000 to repair properly. The alignment problems alone will wear through tires like there's no tomorrow. Your concrete can is teaching her a very expensive lesson. We spent the following hour devising our multifaceted attack plan. Jim would keep an eye on Brenda's actions and record any attempts at retaliation. Mrs. Olivia would manage the door-to-door effort to rally support from neighbors. Patricia would handle the internal politics, working to build a consensus among board members for a financial audit. Dale would be our technical expert for any construction-related evidence. The legal strategy demanded careful timing. Amanda Sterling had confirmed that we had strong cases for harassment, financial fraud, and board misconduct. But the timing was critical. If we filed too soon, Brenda might get rid of evidence. If we waited too long, she might complete whatever cover-up she was undoubtedly devising. I had learned a valuable lesson from 22 years of electrical troubleshooting. Complex issues need multi-layered fixes. Tackling HOA overreach with only property rights arguments is like attempting to fix a short circuit by just changing one fuse. You have to address the entire system. Our strategy would attack from 4 directions at once. Legal pressure through criminal complaints and civil lawsuits. Social pressure through community organizing and petition drives. Political pressure through media coverage and municipal oversight. And financial pressure through demands for an audit and contract terminations. The community organizing effort began on Wednesday morning, equipped with professional presentation materials and undeniable proof. I started visiting every home in Pinewood Gardens. The reaction was remarkable. 89 signatures in support of property rights, 34 calling for an immediate financial audit, and 12 offering to testify at the forthcoming board meeting. Mrs. Rodriguez from Maple Street was on the verge of shutting her door before I could state my case. 5 minutes later, she was vehemently signing the petition and muttering Spanish phrases that were likely not flattering to Brenda's character. "That woman tried to fine me for having my garbage can out 15 minutes early," she exclaimed. 15 minutes! As if the garbage police were timing us with stopwatches. An analysis of the opposition showed interesting trends. Brenda's staunchest allies were all longtime homeowners who had gained from the selective application of rules. The undecided were mainly newer residents who were worried about property values or retaliation from the board. Everyone else was eager for some accountability. Preparing for media engagement took 3 days of meticulous planning. Channel 7's investigative team focused on stories of municipal corruption, and reporter Sarah Kim had reported on similar HOA controversies throughout the metro area. The press kit contained professional timeline graphics, expert legal analyses, and 12 minutes of edited footage showing Brenda's escalating collision attempts. The social media campaign took off more quickly than I had expected. The Pinewood Gardens Transparency Facebook group attracted 67 members in just 4 days, with neighbors sharing their own experiences of selective enforcement, harassment, and financial discrepancies. Someone uploaded a time-lapse video of Brenda's morning routine set to circus music, which went viral across the suburban community network. Meanwhile, my concrete trash can continue to serve as both evidence and a source of amusement. Thursday morning marked collision attempt number 53, which left a headlight casing dangling like a broken tooth. The neighborhood kids had started to congregate at bus stops earlier just to see the daily demolition derby. Emma mentioned that her friends at school were referring to our house as the place with the indestructible trash can. Tyler had begun charging his classmates 50 cents each to view the video compilation on his phone. The story was spreading beyond our community faster than gossip at a church social. By Sunday evening, all preparations were complete. The board meeting was set for Tuesday night. Media interviews were scheduled for Wednesday morning, and criminal complaints were ready for filing on Thursday. A total of 118 residents had pledged to attend the confrontation, with 17 intending to speak during the public comment period. The coalition was formed, the evidence was airtight, and Brenda had no inkling of what was about to happen. It was time to lower the boom. The weekend prior to our scheduled board meeting ambush, Brenda completely lost control. Desperation has a distinct aroma, like burnt coffee and panicked sweat, and it was practically emanating from her every action. She had clearly sensed the net closing in, as her campaign of harassment intensified from merely bothersome to potentially criminal more quickly than her Escalade could collide with my concrete fortress. On Saturday night, I was awakened by the sound of spray paint through my bedroom window, I could see a shadowy figure crouched next to my trash can, lit by the motion-activated lights. By the time I had grabbed my phone and made my way outside, the person was gone, leaving behind crude graffiti that spelled out "Move" in glaring orange letters across the concrete. The wonderful thing about spray paint on concrete is that it can be pressure washed away in about 30 seconds. The wonderful thing about security cameras is that they capture everything in high definition, including the license plate numbers of pearl white Escalades parked 3 houses down at the time of the incident. Monday brought a new form of harassment. An anonymous tip to the gas company alleged that I had been engaged in suspicious digging activities that could potentially harm underground pipelines. The utility inspector who arrived was apologetic but meticulous, spending 2 hours with detection gear before verifying what I already knew. No digging, no violations, no issues, honestly, he said as he loaded his equipment back into his truck. Whoever reported this either has severe vision problems or serious psychological issues. There is no excavation anywhere on your property. The development that revealed Brenda's true desperation came on Tuesday morning. Jim Torres found me at the hardware store, his rugged face etched with worry. "Marcus, she has hired a private security firm to monitor your house? Riverside Security? I know the owner's cousin. $200 a day. For surveillance over a trash can dispute. The woman has completely lost her mind." However, Brenda's surveillance was a two-way street. My upgraded security system had recorded her drive-by inspections, her late-night photography sessions, and her increasingly unpredictable behavior. The woman was coming apart at the seams faster than a low-quality extension cord, and every moment was being preserved for the record. Wednesday brought the revelation that genuinely angered me. Emma returned from school distressed, having overheard Brenda discussing dangerous neighborhood influences and inappropriate role models for community children with another parent. The racial undertones were not subtle, and the potential impact on my custody situation was unmistakable. That evening, I enlisted the services of Beth Morrison, a retired police detective with a specialty in harassment cases. For $200 a day, I could obtain professional documentation of Brenda's stalking, along with a law enforcement expert to testify about patterns of escalation and threat levels. The sabotage efforts grew more intense throughout the week. Someone poured a substance that appeared to be battery acid on my concrete trash can. It left a minor stain but caused no structural harm. A flood of anonymous complaints was sent to the city about everything from the height of my lawn to my electrical work permits. Fake negative reviews began appearing on my business's Google listing more quickly than I could report them for removal. But the most stunning discovery occurred on Friday evening. Tyler was working on his bicycle in the driveway when he noticed something unusual affixed to the undercarriage of my work truck. A small, black device with blinking lights and a magnetic base. "Dad," he called out, his voice tense with alarm. "What's this thing attached to your truck?" It was a GPS tracker, professional grade, likely worth $300 and definitely illegal when installed without permission. I took photos of it from every angle before carefully detaching it and driving directly to the police station. Officer Derek Martinez handled the report with the weary demeanor of someone who had seen this kind of escalation before. "Mr. Holloway, this has moved beyond a simple neighborhood disagreement and into criminal activity, unauthorized surveillance, stalking, harassment. We are compiling a case file that could lead to significant charges." The insurance fraud aspect emerged at the same time. Brenda had submitted a $3,200 claim for road hazard damage, alleging that her collision took place on a city street rather than on my property. The issue for her was my Ring camera footage, which clearly depicted the deliberate targeting of my trash can from various angles over several weeks. When State Farm's investigator contacted me for an interview, I was prepared. With a comprehensive evidence package, 53 documented collision attempts, witness statements, a video compilation, and a professional analysis of the damage patterns, the investigator's response was swift and firm. "Ma'am, this is not road hazard damage. This is intentional property destruction with an expensive vehicle. We are denying the claim and forwarding the case to our fraud unit for criminal investigation." The community pressure was intensifying like steam in a pressure cooker. Our Facebook group had expanded to 94 members, who were sharing increasingly unbelievable stories of Brenda's conduct. Mrs. Patterson reported being harassed about her rose bushes. The Johnsons on Oak Street had been cited for their children's sidewalk chalk drawings. Even Gerald Thornfield was privately disassociating himself from her behavior. Saturday morning brought collision attempt number 57, this time resulting in a completely detached bumper that Brenda had to pick up from my driveway. The image of her crawling around in her business attire, collecting plastic pieces while neighbors watched from their windows, would have been comical if it weren't so tragic. By Sunday evening, the compilation of evidence was finished. Criminal behavior documented, witness statements notarized, financial fraud uncovered, and a community coalition formed. Tuesday's board meeting was set to be less of a confrontation and more of a public reckoning. Brenda just wasn't aware of it yet. On Monday morning, just 12 hours before our scheduled board meeting confrontation, Brenda made her most desperate move. Gerald Thornfield convened an emergency closed-door session to discuss what he described as escalating liability concerns and community safety issues. The man's voice on my voicemail sounded as if he had been gargling with gravel and anxiety for breakfast. The emergency meeting was a textbook case of damage control. 3 board members gathered in the community center office while Harold Masterson, an attorney from Prescott and Associates, billed them $400 an hour to assess how deeply they had sunk into legal trouble. Through the window blinds, I could see animated hand movements and what appeared to be Brenda waving documents like flags of surrender. Patricia Lopez sent me text updates from inside the meeting. Brenda's alleging you've made terrorist threats, wants emergency powers to seize dangerous modifications. Harold looks like he'd rather be defending serial killers. The attempt to cover up was as inept as Brenda's morning collision methods. Someone had backdated conflict of interest disclosure forms for Whitmore Construction, but the digital timestamps on the email server revealed a different narrative. You cannot retroactively establish ethical compliance, particularly when the original contract votes are documented in public meeting minutes. Meanwhile, the insurance investigation was accelerating faster than Brenda's Escalade could hit my concrete fortress. State investigator Maria Santos had issued subpoenas for HOA financial records, board meeting minutes, and all correspondence between Brenda and the association's insurance provider. The paper trail was as inconspicuous as a slow-motion train wreck. Tuesday afternoon delivered the most startling revelation yet. Richard Whitmore, Brenda's husband, contacted me directly, an act that required more bravery than I had anticipated from a man who had been watching his wife squander their life savings one collision at a time. Marcus? His voice was barely a whisper. This needs to end. She spent $8,000 on lawyers, surveillance, and vehicle repairs. Our insurance has been canceled. The business is facing contract terminations. I need to know, what will it take to resolve this? I almost felt a pang of sympathy for the man. Almost. Richard, your wife has stalked my family, vandalized my property, committed insurance fraud, and embezzled from 127 homeowners. This isn't something that can be fixed with an apology and a check. The development that showed just how desperate they had become occurred 2 hours before the board meeting. Brenda submitted an emergency restraining order petition, relying on entirely fabricated evidence. Fake threatening voicemails, altered photos of aggressive encounters, and witness statements from non-existent people. The petition was so shoddily put together that Judge Patricia Williams threw it out without even setting a hearing. Miss Whitmore, these recordings are clearly edited. These photos are obviously staged, and these witnesses appear to be fictional. Submitting false evidence is contempt of court. Consider this your one and only warning. But Brenda's legal woes were growing faster than her collision attempts. The state insurance commissioner had tasked investigator Maria Santos with building a criminal fraud case. The district attorney's office was looking into charges of harassment and stalking. The IRS had been sent copies of all financial records showing unreported income from the construction contracts. As 6 p.m. neared, the community center parking lot began to fill up like it was Black Friday at Best Buy. Cars were parked along both sides of Maple Street, with neighbors walking from 3 blocks away, carrying lawn chairs and folding signs. The Channel 7 news van arrived precisely at 5:30, soon followed by Channel 12 and the reporter from the Metro Weekly who had been tracking our story. Inside the meeting room, the tension was so thick you could cut it with a concrete saw. A total of 118 residents crammed into a space intended for 40, with overflow crowds lining the walls and spilling out into the hallway. The smell of nervous sweat mingled with the scent of industrial coffee, creating an atmosphere dense enough to chew. Brenda made a fashionably late entrance, accompanied by Harold Masterson, looking as though she would rather be anywhere else in the world. Her signature navy blazer had been swapped for funeral black, and the Tremor in her hands was noticeable from across the room. Gerald Thornfield kept fiddling with his tie as if a noose were tightening around his neck. The attempted intimidation backfired spectacularly. Masterson's opening remarks about frivolous complaints and disruptive residents were cut short by Mrs. Olivia, who stood up holding her stack of witness statements. "Excuse me," she stated in her careful English, "but which of us has been committing insurance fraud and embezzling money?" The room erupted in applause and nervous laughter. 17 neighbors had prepared to speak during the public comment period, each one equipped with evidence of Brenda's harassment, financial discrepancies, or selective enforcement. The collection of evidence filled 3 bankers' boxes and contained everything from collision videos to contract analyses to receipts for criminal complaints. But the real shocker was still to come. At exactly 6:45, as Brenda was trying to evade questions about the Whitmore construction contracts, Officer Derek Martinez entered the community center doors holding an official-looking folder. "Sorry to interrupt," he declared to the now silent room, "but I have a warrant to serve concerning insurance fraud and stalking charges." The color drained from Brenda's face faster than antifreeze from her damaged Escalade. Harold Masterson immediately began murmuring urgent legal counsel, while Gerald Thornfield appeared to be experiencing chest pains. The game was over. Check and mate. It was time for the public reckoning. The community center had never witnessed such an event. 127 residents, literally every homeowner in Pinewood Gardens, were squeezed into a room designed for perhaps 40 people, with an additional 15 media personnel setting up cameras as if it were a presidential debate. The air conditioning was overwhelmed by the body heat, and the fluorescent lights buzzed above like agitated wasps sensing an impending confrontation. I had chosen a strategic position in the 3rd row, situated between Mrs. Olivia and Jim Torres, with my concrete trash can brought in as Exhibit A and placed proudly next to the podium. The symbolism was not subtle. That 60-pound monument to her foolishness had become the key witness in the proceedings that were about to take place. Brenda sat at the board table, looking as though she would prefer a root canal without anesthetic. Her customary navy blazer had been swapped for funeral black, and every few moments, she would cast a glance towards the exit, like a cornered animal plotting its escape. Harold Masterson whispered frantic legal advice into her ear, while Gerald Thornfield was sweating through his shirt like a man confronting his own downfall. The arrival of Officer Martinez with the warrant folder had changed the entire dynamic. The room fell silent, save for the mechanical whirring of news cameras and the nervous tapping of Brenda's pen on the table, a rapid staccato that sounded like Morse code for "Help me," Gerald called. For order, his voice cracking like a teenager's. "We will now take public comments regarding recent community concerns." I was the first to stand, holding my presentation boards like a prosecutor addressing the jury. The room was so still you could hear the hum of the exit sign transformer. "Ladies and gentlemen," I started, my voice projecting easily through the crowded space. "This is not about trash cans. This is not about HOA bylaws, property rights, or community standards. This is about accountability, transparency, and putting a stop to corruption before it ruins our neighborhood." I methodically guided them through the timeline. 57 documented collision attempts, each one captured in high definition. The GPS tracker illegally installed on my vehicle. The spray paint vandalism recorded by security cameras, and the fraudulent insurance claims that amounted to felony fraud. But the truly stunning part was the financial presentation. Using a borrowed projector, I displayed the contract analysis, which revealed that $23,400 had been funneled from community dues directly into Brenda's family business. "Every month, you have been paying increased fees to finance Mrs. Whitmore's personal construction company," I declared, observing the jaws drop throughout the room. 7 contracts, 7 undisclosed conflicts of interest, 7 violations of state nonprofit law. The video compilation followed. 12 minutes of Brenda's greatest hits, accompanied by a soundtrack of crunching plastic and scraping metal. The gasps and uneasy laughter from the audience served as the perfect backdrop to the footage of her increasingly frantic collision attempts. Then came the climactic moment I had been practicing for weeks. "Mrs. Whitmore," I said, turning to look at her directly as the cameras filmed, "you've spent $3,400 on lawyers, wrecked your $60,000 vehicle, committed insurance fraud, and stalked my family, all over a $23 trash can. But the real crime is the $47,000 you've embezzled from this community through your family's construction company. The room exploded. Neighbors who had been complaining about rising HOA fees finally understood where their money had been disappearing. Mrs. Rodriguez stood up, shouting in rapid Spanish that was likely not complimentary. The teenagers from Elm Street actually began to applaud as if they were at a concert. Brenda's reaction was everything I had anticipated and more. She sprang from her chair like a jack-in-the-box, her carefully maintained composure finally shattering under the strain. "This is harassment!" she shrieked, her voice reaching pitches that probably disturbed dogs 3 blocks away. "These people have no concept of property values or community standards. They move into respectable neighborhoods and think the rules don't apply to them." The racial undertones lingered in the air like smoke from a house fire. Channel 7's camera recorded every word, every gesture, every moment of her complete psychological unraveling. Mrs. Olivia audibly gasped when Brenda pointed directly at her and yelled something about certain elements ruining the community. Harold Masterson tried in vain to manage his client, but Brenda was past listening to legal counsel. She seized my evidence boards, attempting to rip them apart before Jim Torres and 2 other neighbors gently intervened. The woman was having a total meltdown on live television, while Officer Martinez calmly jotted down notes for his incident report. "I built this community," she screamed, mascara streaking down her cheeks like black tears. "I protected property values. I maintained high standards. And this is the thanks I get for sacrificing everything for neighborhood integrity." Gerald Thornfield called for a recess, but no one was leaving. This was more compelling than reality TV, more dramatic than a soap opera, and more satisfying than seeing your worst enemy step on a rake. Patricia Lopez rose amidst the turmoil and proposed the motion everyone had been anticipating. "I move for the immediate suspension of Brenda Whitmore from the board, pending a criminal investigation and financial audit." The vote was unanimous, 4-0, with Brenda abstaining while handcuffed. To Officer Martinez's chair, justice was served, concrete cold, with a side of public humiliation. The aftermath played out like a series of dominoes falling in perfect order. Within 48 hours of the board meeting disaster, Brenda's world crumbled more quickly than her Escalade suspension system under the strain of repeated concrete impacts. Tuesday morning saw her formal resignation, submitted in a bitter 2-line text that cited a hostile work environment and personal attacks. By Thursday, the district attorney had pressed insurance fraud charges, which carried a potential sentence of up to 6 months in jail and $5,000 in fines. Her insurance license was revoked on Friday afternoon, followed by the suspension of Whitmore Construction's contractor certification. The financial consequences were swift and severe. Our emergency HOA audit, carried out by Patterson and Associates CPAs, recovered $47,000 in overcharges and dubious contracts. Every homeowner received a refund check for $12,500. As we discussed, Brenda asked me to inform you that she is moving to Florida to live with her sister. I almost felt a pang of sympathy for him, but then I recalled the GPS tracker, the fraudulent insurance claims, and the months of harassment my family had been subjected to. Some lessons are costly, and this one cost them everything. The transformation in governance was extraordinary. Patricia Lopez was elected board president in a special election by a unanimous vote, campaigning on a platform of transparency and community involvement. The new board established conflict of interest disclosure rules, monthly financial reports, and public contractor bidding procedures that would make city governments envious. Our first community project under the new leadership was the renovation of the playground, funded entirely by the recovered embezzled funds. Watching Emma and Tyler contribute to the design of the new equipment alongside neighbors who had once whispered about our disruptive family felt like an emotional victory combined with practical advancement. The legal precedent set extended beyond our community. Holloway versus Pinewood Gardens HOA was referenced in 12 subsequent property rights cases throughout Ohio. The state legislature enacted the HOA Accountability Act, which mandates financial disclosure and audit practices that insurance investigators have termed the gold standard for municipal oversight. Channel 7's investigative report won a regional Emmy for its exposé on suburban corruption, and reporter Sarah Kim still contacts me from time to time for expert opinions on HOA reform legislation. The original collision videos have garnered over 200,000 views on YouTube, sparking similar resistance movements in communities from Toledo to Cincinnati. My concrete trash can has become a local legend. We relocated it to the community center lobby as a permanent exhibit, complete with a bronze plaque that reads, "Property Rights Protected, 2023. New homeowners are given the full account during their orientation sessions, and visiting contractors often request to see the renowned, indestructible can that dismantled a corrupt board. But the truest victory was the healing of the community. The Concrete Can Days Festival we initiated now attracts families from 3 neighboring developments each September, offering bounce houses, barbecue contests, and educational seminars on homeowner rights. Last year's event drew over 800 attendees, transforming our ordeal into a triumph and our defiance into a celebration. The scholarship fund I created with the settlement money has enabled 4 students to attend college so far. The Marcus Holloway Property Rights Scholarship gives preference to applicants who show creative problem-solving skills in the face of institutional resistance, essentially rewarding future nonconformists who refuse to passively accept injustice. Emma and Tyler learned lessons about principled defiance that no civics lesson could have imparted. Emma's college application essay on combating corruption with concrete evidence secured her admission to 3 journalism programs. Tyler launched a YouTube channel named Suburban Justice, where he covers HOA conflicts across the Midwest with the zeal of a teenage investigative journalist. The personal healing was the most surprising aspect for me. My custody evaluation saw a significant improvement after the community came together to support our family. The judge remarked that children gain from witnessing parents advocate for principles and safeguard family interests through legal means, rather than through violence or submission. My electrical contracting business grew through recommendations from neighbors who had seen my documentation abilities and strategic approach. It seems that methodical problem-solving is a transferable skill from HOA conflicts to intricate wiring projects, and my reputation for achieving results correctly opened up opportunities throughout the county. Sometimes David does defeat Goliath, but only when David is equipped with evidence, allies, and 60 pounds of steel-reinforced concrete. Leave a comment and tell your HOA nightmare story. Let's create a database of corruption and support each other in the fight. Click that subscribe button if you enjoy more stories where the underdog triumphs through preparation, patience, and impeccable timing. Justice is most satisfying when served with community backing and inventive problem-solving. Thanks for joining us on End for HOA, where the HOA Karens get their comeuppance. If the story made you cheer or wince, feel free to like the video, leave a comment with your thoughts, and subscribe so you'll be ready for the next outrageous HOA saga.